Totally fine.
Okay.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a PHCC webinar. Thank you, Paul, for uh, offering to do this wonderful presentation. And just going to go over some functions with everyone. I know everyone's probably a pro at this point with Zoom and webinar and video calls and everything else, but just please stay muted when our speakers are presenting. We are going to have time at the end to have ask questions. If you want to use the chat, I'll be monitoring it. That is at the bottom. Please feel free to use it. Um, you can also raise your hand if you don't know this. If you click on your name, you're able to raise your hand. So that is another way to signify that you have a question, and we'll be able to see that. But that's pretty much it. Paul, this is all you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. This has been some years so far. One day I'm walking on the street in the city visiting clients. The next day I'm hunkering down, wearing a mask, trolling for toilet paper and fielding calls for payroll reductions. That was my life for a while. Next day we're learning new phrases, new language, idioms like remote workplace, virtual meetings, virtual classes, distance learning, social distancing, webinars, just to name a few. PPE, personal protection equipment, was taken to a new level in our lives, especially with OSHA and actually the world. I found out also that Zoom was not just what you can do with your camera. I didn't know anything about that. Now with school starting, we're finding out that it is easier to decipher a blueprint than to figure out what days and hours your kid goes to school when they have tried their hand at virtual learning at home. Why go to a store anymore when you can get anything you want with just a click of the button? Vacations, what's that, right? I'm happy to walk on a vacant trail. Just look at where we are now as opposed to around 6 months ago. It reminds me of that Grateful Dead song, "What a long, strange trip it's been." I think that's pretty appropriate right now. Well, let's get started on this afternoon's program. Let me begin by introducing our panel of knowledgeable people in the workers' comp and in safety. First up will be Elizabeth Wolski, who is a licensed broker that works in our workers' comp underwriting department. She has over 10 years of experience specializing in group underwriting issues. Next, we have Garrett Wilson, our claims manager, who holds 2 association titles, AIC and AIS. Garrett has over 15 years working with claims and hearings. Next is Alan Faxon, our safety specialist for the upstate region. He has a combined 15 years of experience in safety issues, beginning when it was his job, or one of his jobs, to keep 30 Marines in his platoon safe while vacationing in the sun and sand of Iraq and Benghazi. And last but not least is Anthony Vacchio, with over 40 years of safety. He was a licensed construction superintendent. He is an OSHA certified trainer, certified safety professional. He has the usual alphabets and titles. We'll go after his name, but we're limited in time. So let's begin. Let's start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth is going to talk about underwriting at this time. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, hi everyone. So the first topic I'll discuss is the new classification. The New York Rating Board recently introduced a new classification, code 8873, for temporarily reassigned or idle employees. This classification would apply to any employee who is either working from home or who you were paying while they weren't working, regardless of their actual classification. So if you had a PPP loan that enabled you to pay your employees while they weren't actually working, that portion of their payroll could be classified under 8873. It's important that this payroll is separate and noted in your payroll records so it can be verified when your audit is done. The cost for the new classification is the same as clerical code 8810, which, as most of you probably know, is a very low rate. So updating your policy with this information can reduce your premium. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on to the next topic? No? Okay. So next, I'm going to discuss payroll changes. Many companies have experienced significant decreases in payroll due to the pandemic. Since your workers' comp policy is based on payroll, it's important to contact your insurance broker or carrier if you see that your payroll has changed, so that you're not overpaying and so that you're paying an amount that is accurate and affordable to your current situation. So if your business has slowed, if you laid off employees or cut back hours, you could have your policy adjusted. Does anyone have any questions on that part?
Just a quick question. Does that mean, well, and at this point now that this is more of a stage of recovery, what do you think should it be done to wait until the payroll audit, or to start doing it now to get it, get ahead of the curve, if you will?
Well, I've noticed that some companies are kind of just opening back up, and they never really adjusted the payroll, to decrease it. So they're opening back up now and getting back into things and seeing that, they have these large bills from the state insurance fund. So in that case, it would make sense to reduce it if you lost like 3 or 4 months out of the year. That would obviously impact your annual payroll. And the same goes, some companies reduced their payrolls back in March or April when this first started, and they reduced them very drastically down. So it makes sense for those companies to then, review it now and see if they're still on the right track. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Next topic, deferring payments. Most insurance carriers are allowing some form of deferred payments. Each carrier will have their own guidelines and policies, but I think you'll find that most are willing to work with you if you're experiencing financial hardship. State Insurance Fund just started this month, allowing policyholders who fell behind on their installments or missed payments during the pandemic to spread out the deferred payments in 12 equal installments. So if you didn't pay your installments for the last 6 months, you can now pay off that past due balance over the next year. Does anyone have any questions on that? No? Okay. The last topic I'll discuss is remote audits. The New York Rating Board is now allowing audits to be conducted remotely. This started primarily due to the pandemic, but it appears most insurance carriers will continue to offer this as an option even after the pandemic is over. This is great news for those of you who hate having to take the time to meet with an auditor in person. The State Insurance Fund has an audit upload system where you log in at your convenience and upload all of the documents that you would normally show your auditor. I've received a lot of great feedback on their system. I even had one insured who described herself as computer illiterate, and she told me it took her 5 minutes to do the whole thing and that it was so much easier and more enjoyable than meeting with the auditor in person.
Emphasis on enjoyable.
She was pretty excited about it. So to recap, first.
Well, let me just ask you 2 questions on that. First is you think that this is going to be, I know you speak to them constantly, but is this the thing to come now? I mean, this is going to continue on past the pandemic?
The remote audits?
Yeah, is that going to be done a lot more now?
Yep.
So it's going to greatly reduce, except for complicated ones with wrap-ups and, OSIPs.
Yeah, even those ones, they've still been doing them remotely. And I think a lot of the insureds are really enjoying it, not having, a lot of them don't like the State Insurance Fund auditors. So now they can avoid the whole thing. I think it'll definitely continue way past the pandemic.
Okay, so that's great.
There's always going to be some who prefer an in-person audit, and I don't know when that'll start up again, but eventually it will.
And some of it is necessary too. I mean, I've seen some audits that are.
Yes, sometimes it is necessary to meet in person. Right?
But that's good that we can do that, because that's a feather in the cap, and we can get that done at the end of the year. So there's no adjusted premiums at the end, et cetera, and so forth. Everything will come in smoothly.
Yep.
And the other thing, I don't know if you can answer this, is that $500 credit that they'll get.
Right. Oh, sorry, it cut out.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a credit the State Insurance Fund is offering. If you purchased PPE for your company, you can go onto their website. It's really easy. You just put in your policy number, your contact information, and you upload your receipts, and you can get a $500 credit on your policy.
It's pretty.
It is a one-time credit, so it does make sense to wait until you've spent, the full $500, because I'm sure most of you will eventually hit that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, but would it be safe to say that the EMRs next year, not now, but the next EMRs might change if the payrolls will lower? If the payrolls come in lower, that might have an effect on the EMR?
It could, if the payrolls are lower. We really won't see the effect of that, though, until 2022.
Right.
Because it'll be the audited payroll for 2020 that's then hits the 2022 mods. So then we'll start seeing the effect on that. But yeah, of course, if a company's payroll drastically reduced and they had, even if they didn't have any losses, it can impact the EMR.
Right. So that's another reason why it would be a good idea to, no matter what carrier with this, just to make sure that you alert them that your payrolls have changed, because there's a lot of ramifications between the EMR, getting another bidding for a job, discounts, all these things take effect. So it would be in your best interest to get those payrolls adjusted as soon as possible, in my opinion.
And next year, get your audit done as soon as possible, so that you see exactly what you're dealing with.
But don't forget, what you're doing now will affect you a couple of years from now. So it's better to get that done as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Elizabeth? No? Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. I guess, Garrett, you're the next up. This is Garrett Wilson, everyone.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I was asked to prepare some information about a couple topics. So I got 3 topics for you. I might go through all of them. There's a lot of information here, so if you're tired by the end of 2, I can stop there. But first, I'm going to give a quick overview of the state of COVID-19 workers' compensation claims in relation to construction and contractor trades in New York. Second, related to the COVID-19 discussion, I thought it might be a little interesting to go a bit deeper into what makes a disease claim work-related, whether that be COVID or the flu or something like asbestosis. Third, I'm going to speak a little bit about questionable claims and different ways of how you would go about disputing a claim and the options of disputing a claim. I will check for questions after each section. I don't know if Allison wants to let me know if somebody types in the chat box or something. I can't really see it right now.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. All right, so first topic then, the state of COVID-19 claims in workers' compensation. I know a lot of you have been probably bombarded with information about COVID-19 over the past 6 months or so. So I'm sure a lot of you are very knowledgeable about it, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. The most important takeaway for COVID claims I can give you is for workers in the construction and contractor fields in New York, there's an almost 0 chance that one of your employees could successfully pursue a workers' compensation claim for COVID-19. COVID-19 is handled the same fashion as any other disease in New York. I'll talk about a bit more about that in the next section of my presentation, but in New York, no new legislation has been enacted specifically making COVID claims unique in regards to how they're handled. Some states have enacted changes to, they're called presumption laws, meaning that in certain states, a COVID-19 diagnosis is automatically presumed to be related to their work activity. As of right now, there's nothing like that in New York, and there doesn't appear to be anything like that coming up in New York. Governor Cuomo feels that the disability, short-term disability, is the right way to handle it, and they've been able to handle it pretty well to date so far. So, and there's just significantly less claims or significantly less COVID-19 cases in New York than there were months ago. So I don't think they'll make any drastic changes like that now. Does anybody have any questions regarding COVID-19 now, or?
Well, I just wanted to mention one thing is that everyone is familiar with Governor Cuomo. As Garrett correctly said, is a 0% chance that, somebody from a construction industry, et cetera, will be getting, be held in as compensable for a workers' comp claim at this time. There may be an executive order down the line that he may decide to do if the pressure is on him from the right people. So anything can change, but this is just what Garrett's going to speak about. It's just as it sits now. Has been a few claims and maybe Garrett will go into it, I'm not sure, but there has been some claims with COVID that is not first responders. And that has been categorically denied by the Workers' Comp Board. They say no, period. You can appeal it, you can do whatever you want, but the controversy or the validity of the claim will be questioned, and it's not going to be an easy haul to get it. Or there's going to be no, because there's no reason, they won't get it. But again, anything could change. I'm sorry, Garrett, I just wanted to throw that in.
Oh, no, that's fine. One thing I did want to mention after you said that is I was trying to think of a way that construction could be considered work-related in the current atmosphere without a Governor Cuomo type executive decision. And the only thing I could think of is if I know I've seen some news stories of business owners actively discouraging mask wearing in their stores or with clients, around employees, stuff like that. Although I haven't personally seen it, I could definitely see it argued that the employees of that business were exposed to COVID at a significantly higher rate than the general population. And I could see the Workers' Compensation Board giving them, saying that it is work-related just because they've been exposed to it more. So again, I haven't seen that, but it's definitely a possibility. But I'll move on to my next topic, just a little bit more in depth of how a disease type claim is related to New York workers' compensation. And regardless of the sickness, whether COVID-19, flu, cancer, common cold, the compensability is determined in the same way. Like any claim, there needs to be medical treatment. The starting point is always a positive diagnosis from a doctor, as well as an opinion that the disease is work-related. So this needs to be determined prior to moving forward to the tests I'm going to tell you. The first test is what type of work is being performed. If the type of work causes a person to be exposed to a disease at a reasonably higher amount than the general population, then there is a possibility of an occupational disease type claim. For example of this is a nurse working with patients sick with any communicable disease like COVID and subsequently contracts that virus from the patients. They could be considered to have an occupational disease for COVID-19 and get a workers' compensation claim out of that. The second test you got to ask is how did the exposure occur? Instead of a one-time, this is instead a one-time exposure while performing business duties. So if it could be contact with a coworker, a vendor, client, or any object while they're working. Example of this is if like a janitor, if they were emptying trash and they were pricked with an insulin needle and they would go to hospital for that, that would be considered an accident just as a one-time event. And they would have to be treated for those potential diseases, something like hepatitis or HIV or something like that. Third test is what are the circumstances behind the exposure? It needs to be determined whether or not the employee was doing activity beneficial to the employer and during normal work hours. This is the same test that's done through all claims, like any normal type claim, like a back sprain. And finally, the biggest barrier for disease type claims, especially COVID, is how widespread is the disease. For a claim to be compensable, the worker needs to be able to pinpoint the source of the infection. If a disease is very widespread, then it'll be impossible to prove that the exposure solely came through their work activity, unless if they're in a position like a nurse. So for something like the common cold, you could argue that the employee was exposed to a cold from a coworker, and they may have even went to the doctor because it was a especially bad cold. However, the common cold is so common that and widespread that it's possible to determine whether or not the exposure came from work or if it instead came from the grocery store or gas station or something like that. So same thing with COVID-19. Many months ago, the spread was significantly more limited. And it's been since found that it has a very long incubation period, and some people can get sick with it and still pass on, but not actually show symptoms. So it's very hard to pinpoint who the exposure came from and how they actually got the disease. But on the other hand, something like black lung, it's easily traceable back to the source of infection. Like you don't see office workers contracting black lung. Someone black lung is definitely working in a coal mine. Yeah, so just to reiterate about COVID-19, it's so widespread right now, it's impossible to determine where the infection came from. Like Paul said, unless there's an executive order in New York State, COVID will not be a valid workers' compensation claim in the construction trades, since it's just not on their job duties to work with sick people more than the general population. And I'll stop there for any questions.
I'll just make one quick comment on that. If let's just say there is an executive order the governor signs and more people are now allowed to put in a claim for the workers' comp for the COVID-19, there's going to be basically two types. There's going to be one that's going to last for a couple of weeks, and that's the usual symptomatic one. Then there's the other, which will be terrible, but it's the one where they have underlying problems, they have a compromised immune system, etc., that will land them in a hospital, which could, as you all know, can be very costly. So that would be detrimental to your experience mod if that happens, which we hope don't. But what I wanted to ask Garrett, and maybe he can explain it because that has come up in questions to me, is that now the people that have problems with their immune system, are they going to, and they'll, let's just take a hypothetical that it is a claim that they are accepted. It is an accepted claim. There's no question at it now. It's now fact. Are they going to question the disability or the extent of disability for these people due to their underlying conditions?
I can't tell for certain just because I've never seen a COVID-19 claim actually come to fruition. Like most workers' compensation claims, they don't cover the underlying condition. So we see probably the example we see the most is like diabetes. They may have injuries to like their feet, and then they may have complications due to the diabetes. Uh, they'll take care of the orthopedic issues, but they're not going to pay for treatment related solely to the diabetes. I don't know if that answers the question.
So basically, it will not just be a blanket acceptance to all the conditions. So
Yeah,
yeah, it'll
absolutely.
be maybe an aggravation of the condition or something like that, but it won't be a blanket acceptance. And most carriers, well, certainly with us, we would look over that and make sure that it's not accepted. I'm sure some carriers will do the same. But I guess it's also incumbent upon the employers too, that they are aware that somebody has an underlying condition. Well, there's twofold. First is that they're the ones that you have to take better care of as far as their PPE goes. If they're working for you, you take a little extra care with them. And number two is that if they contracted and they do put in a claim, there's nothing to stop them from putting in a claim. So if they do, you would want to tell your carrier, whoever it may be, if you're with us, you let us know that, listen, this guy has some underlying conditions as far as I know, and this is what I know. You don't have to go into details. All you have to do is just alert the carrier and they'll look into the rest of it. That's my opinion, Gary. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely wouldn't accept unrelated conditions in any I'll let the workers' compensation board make that decision. I wouldn't definitely outright accept any of those conditions.
Okay.
All right, should I move on to the third topic?
No questions? Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about disputing questionable claims. This is a topic that comes up quite a bit. Employee reports a questionable injury, and the employer wants to fight tooth and nail to dispute that claim for various reasons. So it's a pretty large and involved topic. I just want to give some baseline information and give some context about why a claims adjuster may not be as adamant about disputing a claim as you would like them to be, just to put them in a little bit of their mindset to just look at the strategy a little bit more. So there are two ways to dispute a claim. The first is to outright dispute the claim immediately from its onset. This is what most people are familiar with. The second way is to dispute a claim using Section 21A of the Workers' Compensation Law. From now on, I'm going to call it accepting the claim without prejudice. It basically gives an injured worker the ability to receive medical and compensation benefits. It allows the insurance carrier an additional year to investigate the legitimacy of the claim. So if any new evidence is found within that period, the insurance carrier can immediately stop all benefits and litigate the claim from there. Handling a claim like this is especially beneficial for in a situation where they were in possibly a car accident before and they had an injury, and then there's uncertainty of whether or not those continued symptoms are related to the car accident or to the new injury. So it gives you more time for the insurance carrier to do a really thorough investigation. Both ways of disputing have their benefits and pros and cons. The benefits of disputing a claim from the onset: no money will be paid out, and the process begins a lot faster. If it's a strong dispute, and it can be taken off the loss run faster as well. The downside to disputing claim from the onset is the insurance carrier won't have the ability to excuse me, to mitigate the cost of the claim. If the insurance carrier ultimately loses the dispute, the back payment will be paid out in a lump sum, and it'll be based solely off of the employee's doctor's medical reports. So you sometimes see 6+ months of total disability payments just because there's no way to actively get those rates any lower. And with that actively mitigating, you could get those injured workers to return to work faster. So on to accepting without prejudice. It gives the carrier a year to investigate the claim further. The insurance carrier can actively mitigate the cost of claims, like I was talking about. There is no delay in medical treatment, so the claimant can potentially return to work faster. And there's less litigation. There's less likely to get attorneys involved. And if no evidence of a dispute is found in that process, it also keeps the cost of claim lower when attorneys are involved. The downside of accepting the claim without prejudice is if the claim is successfully disputed after accepting without prejudice, it can be difficult to get money back from the claimant. And you have to supply new evidence that wasn't initially available for it to be considered. So the first thing to determine is, did an accident actually happen? Or was there an event that, or something that happened that may have caused an injury? If the answer is no, and you're sure that the employee is making up a fake injury, and you have evidence that he's falsifying the information, then you probably want to dispute it outright. If the answer is yes, there was an accident, but there's definitely some questions about some of the symptoms not being related to work, then the best way to handle those situations are accepting the claim without prejudice. Like I mentioned before, if you had a back injury months prior to before the workers' compensation injury, it's best to accept without prejudice and take that extra time to get the prior medical records and get a consultant exam to get an opinion on whether or not those current symptoms are related to work or related to the previous injury. And it's something else to keep in mind. If an employee had a pre-existing injury to a body part, that doesn't disqualify them from having a same injury to that body part through work. But the good news is, if that happens, if somebody had a pre-existing back injury, for example, and they went to work and got injured again to the back, you would only be liable for the amount past the baseline. So all the insurance carrier would have to pay for would be the treatment past, or treatment to get them back down to his medical baseline. So I've come up with an activity that I thought may be a little bit more fun. I don't know if I'll get the participation, but I've come up with 5 fictional injury scenarios. I'll put you in the role of the claims adjuster. So your goal is to pick the strategy that will keep the cost of claims low and get the claims administered as fast as possible. Also, I'm not sure if we can set up a poll or not.
Well, let's skip that part.
Okay. Do
Everyone
you want me to
can
go
use a
through the examples
reaction.
then, or?
What was
Would
that?
that be helpful? People can use a reaction if they agree. Would that help?
Yeah, it's fine. We'll just, if anybody.
But before that, if I can just say one thing, is that I think and I have to say it only because the workers' comp law is written for, it's social legislation that is written for the claimant, not for the employer. So it's incumbent upon the employer to obtain as much information as they can, as quickly as they can, to provide to the insurance carrier, or if you're with us, to us, so that we can defend it quickly. As Gary was mentioning, it's very difficult when you're paying without prejudice, that term, to get that money back. I mean, we'd fight for it and we try to get it off of your EMR if we won. But the thing is that it will still be sitting there and there's no other carrier to go to. So, you know, the information, if you can get it, if you can grasp it, if you have it without jeopardizing yourself or violating any laws, if you can have that information and provide it to the carrier, that would help you as much as possible. I mean, one employer asked me once, you know, what do I do? You know, and he took the guy's personnel jacket, his folder, and he gave it to me, and it was this thick. And he said, "What do I do?" And I said, "You have a photocopy machine, make copies, send it to the carrier, and let them pull out. I mean, pull out some of the sensitive things that you don't want them to see, if there's any police activity, things like that. But if there's a doctor's name, if there's a name of an adjuster, if there's a name of, if you know that, oh, I heard that he had an auto accident 5 years ago and he hurt this, say it. It can't hurt. Let the examiner at the insurance carrier go through that. I mean, I used to love that, 100 years ago when I was doing it, I used to love getting the emergency room report, because in there, when you have a person that goes there, they spill their guts about everything. They don't just keep everything in. They say, well, this is going to go there and it's going to go. But the insurance carrier is able to get those records and look through it and see different things that might help them in defense of a claim. So by all means, again, as long as you're not violating any laws, just, get the information and send it on, or ask the insurance carrier, what do you want me to do with this? You have to take a proactive role, because what happens is at the end of the day, the claim is going to be charged against you, not the insurance company. The insurance company is going to be made whole. Believe me. Don't worry, that's not a worry with them. So what they want to do is they want to do the best they can for you if you give them the information. It would greatly accelerate their defense, if needed to have a defense. So I just wanted to throw that in, my 2 cents there. So I'm sorry, Garrett, go ahead. I keep interrupting.
No problem. All right, so do you want me to go through the scenarios, or do you want me to end there?
Well, what do you feel, guys? You want to continue with that, or?
I don't know if I'm running late on time.
Well, let's go to safety, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Unless you need something else, Garrett.
Oh no, I'm good. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Tony, if you can start on this, I know you're anxious. There's a lot of things to talk about with that, and especially with Alan's point of the responsibilities of the employer, and dealing with, the employer has to deal with, if possible, the insurance carrier, the employees, the OSHA, and all the other agencies, and the GC, and subs that are working with them. So there's a lot there. And I know that you want to cover that. So I'll just go ahead, get started, and see where we go.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share the screen a little bit. I'm just going to see if I can bring up the slide here. All right. That's everybody knows that already. I'm already having problems because it's not clicking. Hold on for a second. Okay. Basically, what we want to speak about tonight mostly is the COVID-19 and the impact on job site health and safety. My associate Alan is going to speak about the employer requirements for employees and requirements at job sites. Now, these are going to vary and actually be different depending on where you work and who you're working for, different types of construction managers and what have it. We're also going to just touch on the COVID-19 and governing agencies relating to fines, who's out there looking to pick your pockets relating to this stuff. New York City COVID-19, that's a whole, 5 boroughs in New York City. I always refer to a different country. They always have their own rules and regulations. Just going to touch on that because I'm not sure how many of you guys actually work within the city limits, or you do work for big construction managers, and the COVID-19 policy and safety plan. All right, these are the items we're going to try to cover. First topic I want to touch on is the COVID-19 and impact on job site and health and safety. How's it impact the job sites? Basically, it's slowing them down. All right, it's causing delays and disruptions, even if it's only in the supply chain that have been severely disrupted. Yeah, but this these type of delays, construction industry, we're all kind of used to facing. There's always delays in construction. There's always disruptions. There's always something that's happening on a construction site that's going to delay a job. Problem with COVID-19 is it's new. It's a new problem that has to do with the construction industry, and it directly impacts the employee themselves. So this is something that they really don't know how to deal with. They try to throw it on OSHA, and OSHA saying, "Oh no, that's not us. We're not a government agency. We're a compliance agency. So we don't know what to tell them." The Department of Buildings, they always want to get in there. They didn't know what to do. So what they do, they got I guess the brightest minds on the planet. They got together, and they decided that they're trying to come up with a plan on how to work on these construction sites. So what basically they came up with is on New York City projects, on state, federal, all these big essential projects, they want you to have a written COVID-19 exposure control plan. Right? Basically what that is, it outlines how a workplace will keep workers safe and prevent the spread of COVID-19. Now, that's a broad statement. It's very detailed, and basically anyone who works within the city of New York or the 5 boroughs must have a written exposure COVID-19 plan. All right, and we offer it to our members. We came up with it. There was some samples at the state, some guidelines that they wanted us to go through and to follow. And we put together a plan that will satisfy the state and the city. Now, depending on where you're working for, if I've spoken to many of our clients, some of them are very large, some of them are medium, some of them are just mom and pop stores. And you talk about, that I ask them how this COVID-19 has really affected their business. And I'm getting answers from, it's been tragic to, it really hasn't affected me that much, But however, if OSHA gets involved, or any of these governing agencies get involved for some reason that your employee comes down with COVID-19 and, files a complaint with the board, you become very involved. You're subject to some of these fines. You're subject to other things that they come up with from the state. Now, if you're just like a mom and pop store, you have maybe 2 or 3 trucks, you have 6 men doing service calls, you still have to have some sort of a plan involved. OSHA is going to issue fines, and they're going to reference to the general duty clause, all right, which, if I can get to that, all right, you're supposed to provide a free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. All right, so they're gonna refer to this clause for just about anything that occurs on relating to COVID-19. All right, so you must have a plan in place. For the small guy, if you have service guys that are entering homes, you can't just send your employee into someone's home, say they needed a water heater, they don't have any hot water. Now they have to have the heater changed, and they call you to come in and do a service call. You send that employee in there, and the guy omitted to tell you that he tested positive for COVID-19. You're putting your employee within that duty clause. So you need to be careful. What I recommended to those companies is that they would actually have a questionnaire before they would send their employee into that environment. You would have to ask the customer if they were exposed to. Actually, I have a questionnaire that we set up, and if they were exposed to any of that, and you would give this form to the employee with them and have them certify that they are not COVID-19 positive and they are free from, they haven't had any contact from. And that will kind of at least have OSHA assess that you are doing your part to avoid sending your employee into into a hazardous situation, right? But in the city, if you're a big GC, a lot of these GCs and construction managers, they try to flow the responsibility downhill, and they try to put a lot of the stuff on the subcontractor. Well, although all the subcontractors also need to have a COVID-19 safety plan in place for their employees. All right, but the general contractor normally is responsible for providing the wash stations, and they may enforce certain other rules like temperature checking your temperature before you enter the site. They may put a restriction on leaving the site for lunch. They may force you to eat lunch inside. So these are a lot of things that the actual general contractor will be able can and will put into their forms. So as a subcontractor, I would be actually really read your contract pretty thoroughly before you sign it, because this COVID-19 written exposure control plan involves a lot, and some of the bigger guys like Tishman and Gil Bain and all those other guys, they're even making it more tougher. You know, they're putting a lot of restrictions on there. But if you're your own little, like you say, you have a smaller company, you only have maybe 6 guys or 10 guys that you work for, you know, you just need to know, you have to be careful as to what environment you're sending your employees into. Just want to go back to the second slide. Employee requirements, this keeps on changing. Okay. Employee requirements for employees and requirements at the job site. I'm just going to have Alan touch a little bit on that as far as PPE requirements and respirator use, face masks, and other requirements that you'll have to have in place at the job site. This is a job site if you're working, you know, if it's a 4 to 6 week job site or anything bigger, you know, service calls are a whole different thing. So you're going to have to adjust your policy in relation to how you guys work out there. So you know, this is a pretty broad area, and I'm just going to have Alan. Alan, you want to chime in on the PPE part?
Well, if I could just say one thing on before that, Alan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that, again, I'm pushing it back to you guys with your carriers. With us, you know, if you're with us and you have an issue where you do get visited by one of the ABC agencies and they're arguing the point with you, or they're asking you for things that you don't readily have with you, especially concerning COVID-19, which is, of course, on everyone's radar, you give us a call and have us, you know, we can deal with them very quickly and efficiently. If you're not with us, then you have a carrier. This could be part of what they do. And I mean, they don't maybe want to do it, but it might be something that they do. And you should get in touch with them as well and say, hey, I have a problem here and I need your input. That's certainly, you know, again, you know, you have, you can utilize the services available to you. Don't be foolish and not do that. And, you know, any questions we can help you in any way, that would be great. We can do that. I'm sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
No, it's so hey, good to see everybody. So I'm gonna be talking about some of the things I know you've probably been beaten to death about COVID-19, what you have to have, what you don't have to have. And like what Tony said, a lot of it changes by, you know, who you're working with. If you're just sending a couple people into a house, or if you're going to show up to a job site. So if you're showing up, but really some of it goes across the board. Pretty much everybody at this point in time has to have some type of pre-screening before you show up to work. So the way that it's written is a general contractor must implement a mandatory daily health screening. So that doesn't have to be done at work. It can be done by guys, your coworkers, your guys and girls just texting in saying, hey, I've got a 98-degree temperature. I'm good to go. I don't have a cough. I feel fine. As long as you have, you know, they have had previous training on what they need to look out for. So that's when I kind of recommend doing just like a toolbox talk. It could be something that everyone gets their own copy of. That way they're aware of what we're looking for. But then place one employee who's going to be in charge of checking that out for each day. Now, if you're working on a big job site for, you know, Turner, Tishman, something like that, sometimes they'll have an on-site safety person that will literally stand there at the gate and make sure that everyone coming in is healthy. If you're going to do something like that, if you're going to have one employee taking, temperatures, then that employee you got to make sure that employee has the proper PPE on. They got to have glasses, they got to have gloves, and they got to have a face covering, just so you're not exposing that one person to everyone coming into work. So that's something that's across the board. It's no longer an if, and, or but. You got to have some type of screening every day for your employees coming in. And like Tony said, sometimes it's your guys they're just going straight to a job site. So they're going to text you, or they're going to, a big general contractor job site. And then, they're going to get tested by a Turner or a Tishman. That counts too. Did you have some, Tony?
I just wanted to go into your, this is a,
yes, there you go.
A screening form that some of these companies force, actually, in order to work on their site, you fill this out every day. All right. It's, are you currently experiencing, and it's a fever? They allow you up to 100.4 Fahrenheit cough, and you have to answer all these. And these are, I believe there's 8 questions to here. Have you been tested for COVID-19? These are questions. There's 8 questions on here, and this is a certification that you have to sign this, and it's dated, and this is another type of employee screening daily log. They would have to fill this out, to fill out yes or no on that. So I just wanted to expand on what Alan was talking about, the screening questionnaire on that. So yep. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, and it sounds silly, but I have a buddy who works in construction in Boston, and he had to shut down his job site because one of his foremen hung out with his son, who got sent back from college because he tested positive for COVID-19. So after hanging out with the son, he came onto the job site, and when they did the questionnaire, he's like, oh yeah, I was hanging out with my son this weekend. So they seem silly, but it's something you got to do, because if it's in place, it's because someone did something dumb at some point. So just one of those things you want to make sure that you have, especially if you're going to get visited by, one of those 3-letter agencies. It's, first stop on the door, you say, yep, we're doing our screening process, and that kind of gives them their original warm and fuzzy.
So you would suggest, Alan, to keep that available at the job site?
At least have a way of explaining it, whether you say it's a text message, or whether it's an online survey they do, or if it's a paper one. If it's a paper one, yeah, keep it on the job site, or at least have photocopies of it. The best thing to do would probably be have them fill it out, and then when you're done filling it out for the day, scan it into a computer. That way multiple people can have access to it.
Well, it should be readily available.
Yeah, it should be readily. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Regardless of where they're working, you should be able to show proof of, these are my employees for today, and them checking in and make sure that they're all, as far as they know, COVID free. So next thing we're gonna go over is kind of hygiene and cleaning on the job site, just because there's some new things that's going out. It's not just the general, sweep up the job site, make sure there's no 2x4s or loose wires on the ground. You're not just hanging up extension cords. There are a lot of other things that, OSHA and other people will be inspecting for now. One big thing is, so contractors must adhere to hygiene and sanitation requirements, whether you're the general contractor or the contractor. So you need to have a list of the date, the time, and the scope of cleaning that you're conducting in the different areas. So if you're working in your shop, you need to have, a piece of paper saying that Joe Schmo clean the shop after each shift, or each employee coming in will clean his or her work areas before the day begins. But you need to be able to write down the time that happened at and the scope of the cleaning. Now, the scope of the cleaning is a little bit different nowadays. They put out a new thing. The EPA wants you using an EPA registered disinfectant. So pretty much what they're saying is now that they know that there's a couple things that can kill the coronavirus. So they want you to be using that, especially in high traffic areas or places where tools are going to be swapping hands a lot. So just for an example, 2 of the products that I know about today are Lysol disinfectant spray and Lysol disinfectant cover mist. So both of those have been approved through the EPA. They have a little EPA number on the bottle of it, and they're out there. Whoever you buy your cleaning products from for either your job sites, your trucks, they got to be cleaned daily. You got to have a log for that as well. These are things that you got to start thinking about. And you can't just use, I know they were saying just a little bleach and water before, but now they're kind of narrowing it down of what can kill it. So these are the two I know about. This was published in July of 2020. It doesn't mean there aren't more out there. I'm sure there are by now. Everyone's going to want to corner that market. So whoever you buy your products from, just when you talk to them, tell them that you need to have an EPA registered disinfectant for the COVID-19. So it should be pretty simple to get nowadays. Like Tony mentioned earlier, whether you're working at a job site or you're working in your shop, you need to provide hand sanitizing stations. Whether that's hot soap and water, that's completely fine. Or if you're going to be using hand sanitizer, make sure it's 60% or above alcohol. Now, a lot of companies out there are selling this on eBay and Amazon, and it's only 20, 30%. So make sure you're getting something that actually meets the standard. When you're getting these new products, you also want to make sure you're entering them in your SDS. That's another thing that OSHA likes to hit on. I know that when I used to work for construction companies, I got hit once for not having the hand soap in the SDS book. So they let it slide, but it is something that they'll, if you don't have anything else, they'll be pretty nitty gritty about it. All right, personal protective equipment. This is, the big new thing that everyone knows about. And I'm gonna try not to beat it to death on you. So if you're working within 250 square feet of another employee, you have to wear a mask. So that's pretty much 6 feet all the way around you. Now, if you're in your own little bubble like that, you don't have to wear a mask all day long. But most of the jobs that we do these days, you're not gonna be able to do that. So you're gonna have to wear a mask. You as the employer are responsible for giving your employees a mask. And I suggest you have other ones readily available too, because if someone walks to the job site and the guy's got his mask off because he's got oil on it or it's just full of silica dust and he takes it off, they're going to ask you, well, where are your backup masks? And if you say, well, that's just the one we gave him for the day, that's not going to cut it. So I do recommend having extra masks and cleaning stuff in your tool, either in your gang boxes or just available to your employees. Let's see. So contractors must provide acceptable face coverings for their workers at no cost to employees. Face coverings must be clean or replaced after each use and not shared by workers. So obviously you'd think telling them don't share the masks, but you do have to reinforce that. If you are using something, I do recommend you do some type of toolbox talk or some type of training with your employees, just so they know that the bare minimum, and you can fall back on that one day if something, does go right. If you see a guy sharing a mask, that they know they can't do that. Another big thing to note is that just because if a guy's wearing a bandana or they're wearing a surgical mask, that doesn't count as, proper facial or respiratory protection if they're doing something like, I know a lot of plumbers are going to be core drilling a lot of holes. So you need to wear the proper PPE for that. So you need to have the proper masks and the proper canisters ready to go. And when you do put those on, you don't wear your face mask underneath that. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of having the mask on. So face masks, I know everyone's beat them to death. You know what they are. Just make sure they're clean. Make sure your employees are wearing them if they're working within 6 feet of each other. And the majority of the work that we do, they are going to be within 6 feet of each other. So just really enforce that rule. That's a real easy way to get banged up. Other big question out there right now is the difference between the KN95 mask and the N95 mask. So good news is they both take out about 95% of the particulates that we're, trying to keep out, whether that be silica dust or viruses or anything like that. The N95 mask is generally made here in the United States. And while it's pretty much the same, the US has a higher standard of making a breathability. So what that means is, if you're handing them out to people, it's a little easier to breathe in and out of. You're not going to be, sucking too hard on it. And you don't necessarily have to have a fit test on it. Whether you're the employer and you make it so they have to have a fit test, that's fine. You can do that. The KN95 mask is generally made in China, and it's written in there that you have to have a fit test on that. So if you're following the guidelines and you have a KN95 mask, you do have to have a fit test. Their breathability standards are a little bit looser, so some of them are harder to breathe in. Some newer information that's come out about it, it's not a rule yet, but if you notice the KN95 masks, they have a little square on the front. It's a little one-way valve, and it's kind of defeating the purpose of wearing one, because when you breathe out, the particulates that you're spitting out are actually what we're trying to avoid. They're the large droplets. So it actually does come right out of the mask, and you actually could infect, the table or the handrail, or if you're talking to somebody. So a lot of people are actually trying to move away from the KN95 mask because it does have that option or capability of spreading droplets. So just something to think out. As of right now, both are fine to use. If you got a stockpile of them, continue to use them. But just something to think about if you do have employees really working close to each other and they are fine with wearing N95 masks, I would have them wear the N95 masks and not the K95 masks. Also doesn't hurt that they're made in America. The last thing I'll cover right now is just be aware that there are a lot of false masks coming out of China right now, whether this is just for work or for, you know, your personal knowledge at home. A big way to figure out if they're fake is they say that NIOSH has certified them for small children. That's not true. NIOSH has never certified any type of respirators for children. That's just not true. So if you're buying anything for your family, or if you have smaller employees that are looking for masks and the normals don't fit, just be aware of that. Also, they don't have markings on them, or they'll lock behind the ears. They'll have the little rubber bands behind the ears, and N95's masks don't do that. They'll go all around your head. They got the two straps that go above and below, and that's really what you're looking for. So just be aware there have been a lot of them flooded in the market. I guess people have even found them in stores. I don't think anybody like Home Depot or Lowe's would sell them, but if you're in a smaller hardware store and you see a box of them, just give them a quick look and make sure that, you know, it's actually what you're looking for. I know I threw a lot at you. Are there any questions?
I have one comment to make, and that's just more of a personal level. It's just that you were talking about the counterfeit masks. I unfortunately, in a feeding frenzy, went and bought a box that was sitting in a plate. I can't even remember where it was, but it hit the category of being not acceptable by anybody. What I ended up doing was using that mask as to hold in temporarily. I used coffee filters, the 2-ply coffee filters underneath the mask, just to, you know, to use it for a short period of time. Looked very strange, but obviously it did the trick for a while until I was able to get the better quality. So I don't know if you would suggest that, if you have like 3 boxes of them. If you want to go that way, Alan?
Yeah, actually, there are a lot. I mean, a lot of the places, I mean, even the CDC online was talking about different ways to build masks at home, and coffee filters actually are, you know, it's not the best bet. If you could buy something that's actually certified, that's the way to go. But coffee filters actually talked about quite a bit about how if you double them up, they actually do take a lot of the particulates out. Really what you're doing with masks is you're not really protecting yourself from breathing anything in. You're actually keeping yourself from spitting out and protecting anybody else from you. So you're protecting, you know, your neighbor by wearing your mask, or your coworker, which is at the same time, if you've got somebody right next to you who's not wearing a mask, it's not really, it behooves you to tell him to put a mask on, because at the end of the day, he's going to be infecting you and you're going to be saving him. So just kind of look at it like that. And that's a good way to tell your employees about it too. You're not really protecting yourself by wearing a mask. You're protecting everybody around you, including your, you know, your families.
So Alan, with the people that I know 50 and greater, you know, large shops that it's mandated and they have to do that, you know, but on the small offices, I know it's not a OSHA requirement to have, but it can be a company requirement, correct?
I'm sorry, for the square,
For a mask.
For the mask, yeah. So on a construction site, it's 250 square feet. It's kind of like what Tony said. There are a lot of rules that are coming out. They're kind of like recommendations. And it really is going to probably come down to whoever is coming through to inspect you. But you really want to try to follow everything, because like Garrett said, you're just giving them more ammo at the end of the day. Is if they say, you know, 250 square feet, or you have to wear a mask, and you're not following that guideline and someone does get COVID, it gives them a little bit more ammo for them to come after you for liability.
Well, I
I don't
think
know if I answered that correctly, Tony.
yeah, that would be a rule for almost anything. I mean, you never, anyone, any agency, government agency, you never want to turn them away. You want to show them that you have. I mean, you know, can't really say, can you come tomorrow when I can find out what it is that you need? You know, you want to make sure you have that, because they will move in. You give them an inch, they're coming in. They put their foot in the door. You know, they'll be there all day, every day. You know, besides the safety, there's also fines involved, and you know, that's how they make their money too. They want to be there. So my advice would be, if they do come and they're looking for them, if you don't have it, just say, hold it a second, get it. Don't say, can you come back tomorrow? I'm busy. That's one thing you never want to do, ever want to do.
Or, and if OSHA does show up because you did have an employee call about a particular thing, when OSHA does show up, you ask them if you can do a, what's the right term out? A focused inspection, because you can ask the OSHA inspector or whoever, this is why you came in, can we do a focused inspection? That way you're not walking them through your whole shop. You know, you're not giving them the extra time to look around. You can say, can we do a focused inspection? We'll go look at what you're looking at. And, you know, as long as you're nice and polite, most of the time they'll go along with that. They'll do a focused inspection and they won't tour your whole facility or your whole job site, and it kind of gives you a little bit more time. It's worked for me in the past.
Great. All right, Al, that's great. I think you covered mostly what employers actually need to have on a work site. The next thing I just wanted to touch on, the government agencies, especially in the city of New York, Department of Buildings, DOB, New York State Department of Health, New York State executive orders, at the very minimum, all their employers have to follow the New York State governing orders. All right, OSHA is only there to monitor compliance. So if first person in the city is usually going to be the Department of Buildings. First thing they're going to be looking for is their daily logs, which are your disinfecting logs, your screening logs, and to make sure you have a COVID-19 safety plan on site. Those are the first three things they're going to ask to actually see. All right, and then the fines related to these issues are start at $5,000, right, for every infraction. So you know, it could be a very costly thing. All right, DOB, if it comes in there, DOB goes in there. If he thinks the job is a mess, they do have the authority to stop the job. But they'll also inform the New York State Department of Health. Now, you know, they're going to go in there to make sure that social distancing is being adhered to. They're going to make sure that there is an area where employees are able to eat and be free from, you know, other employees. There's like a minimum that you can have in a certain amount of square feet. They're going to be looking for these washing stations, and not just one washing station. There's going to be a minimum of at least one on every floor, depending on how big the construction site is. So these governing agencies, they're going to come in there and you know, actually looking to make money. All right, New York City regulations. That's a whole different animal to talk. You know, there are construction managers and construction GCs that are taking temperatures, employee temperatures. It's not mandated. It's not something that is in the New York State orders, but a lot of the big construction companies are doing it. They're going above and beyond the regulation just to protect themselves on the liability end. All right. If OSHA does come in, all right, the areas of focus, when OSHA comes in, like I said, they're going to refer everything to the general duty clause. They're going to want to see whether the employee has a written pandemic plan, which is the COVID-19 plan. All right, they're also going to be looking for social distancing protocols. They're going to be checking entrances and exits, common areas, lunch, break times, shift changes, restrooms, etc. You know, if it's a large site, they're going to want you to set up a a path of entry, a path of travel, more or less. If there are stairs involved, they're going to want one set of stairs for going up and another set of stairs for coming down. These are all things that they're going to be looking for, especially in New York City. Like I say, I'm not, up outside the city limits, things are a little bit more relaxed, but on these big jobs, these essential products, these essential projects, they're going to be looking for that. All right. Personal hygiene, including hand hygiene stations, as Alan spoke about, identifications of high touch surfaces, cleaning and disinfecting procedures. They're going to want to know what your procedure is, how many times has it been cleaned, when are you cleaning it, during the day, after work. They're going to want to see logs on that. Once again, Alan had mentioned the use of EPA registered disinfectants. Use of employee access to SDS, and that's always been an OSHA thing, but now it's even more, especially when you have disinfectants and other chemicals on the site. They're definitely going to want to know how employees access the SDA sheets to just about anything on your construction site. PPE, before, not only that, they want to see that they want to see an adequate supply, especially of masks and what other items that are supposed to be on there. Proper care and maintenance, which is respirators, use instructions, etc. Signage, they're going to want plenty of signage, like I say, warnings, path of travel, reminders, reminders of keeping your mask on, actually reminders of social distances of masks, all right? They're also going to, there's additional OSHA areas of focus is employee communication and training. Prevention, infection, symptoms, controls, etc. Training is a broad issue too. Employees, a lot of them, depending on who they are, this pandemic has affected them in different ways. Some of them are very, very concerned because they have parents home that are sick, or they don't want to bring it home. So it's basically a fear factor, and fear is what? Fear is not knowing the unknown. So the more you educate your employees on this virus, which right now we have learned a lot more than we did in the early beginning stages, but the more you can communicate the information to them, the better off they'll feel, and the more information they can get about this virus, it'll ease their minds somewhat. It all depends. They're also going to be looking on the screenings, testing. If you have an at-home facility, entrance, if you're doing work at home, that's for visitors also. Certain construction sites are restricting visitors to come unless they also fill out this screening form. Respiratory protection program, which is now, that's one of OSHA's pet peeve. It's always been their pet peeve. They're going to continue on that. Another item is an isolation of visitors, employees experiencing symptoms. Now, if somebody comes to you on a site and says, listen, I'm not feeling good, I got the symptoms that come, you need to have some area where you're going to isolate these people until you can determine whether or not you're going to send them home or not, which is probably what you're going to do. It's basically all you can do. All right, but you got to separate them right away, and there's got to be a procedure for that. So this is something that OSHA is going to be asking what your procedure is. And these items, all these items, are in the written exposure control plan that, once again, we do supply to our members. All right, so it makes it a lot easier for them. All right. Also, another focus of OSHA's inspection is going to be return to work procedures, the protocol. All right, after an employee has tested positive for COVID-19, what procedures do you have in place to have this guy come back and join the general public, the population on the construction site? So other things they're going to be looking for is engineering controls, barriers, dividers, etc., stuff like that in that sense. Administrative controls. They want to know what other controls that you have in place, whether you're going to be staggering work shifts or stuff on that scale. All right. They're also going to be looking on whether or not the employee follows the CDC guidelines. All right. And, once again, that's very easily to determine. I can walk into a construction site and figure out right away whether or not the employee is following CDC guidelines. All right. And another, last but not least, is the OSHA required record keeping. All right. This is all related to the general duty clause, all right, which they can bag you for. And OSHA fines, as you know, they're not cheap. Once again, everything related to COVID-19, from what I understand on the OSHA end, is starting at a $5,000 fine. So, but they realize that this is also no, and they're going to use their discretion on actually before they're giving the fines. Let me see if I can find a slide that I have something here on a.
We're getting the hook, Tony.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We're gonna have to wrap it up.
Okay. But that's basically it. So, my advice to most of you is to please make sure you have a written COVID-19 exposure control plan, and it covers all these items in there, because it's going to save you a lot of money. Number one, it can save you some liability issues. All right, and it's definitely going to help you in the long run. All right, so that's basically it, fellas. If you have any questions, you can ask me, email me, or ask them right now. Be more than happy to answer. All right, great.
Well, we thank you for your attention, and Allison, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone from Hammond Group for that awesome presentation. COVID is a very confusing scenario, so thank you for providing us with all that information.
You're welcome.
Any questions, we're open. They can always contact us.
Perfect.
Okay.
There isn't any other questions. I don't see any in the chat. That is it for us.
Thank you.
Nice job, you guys.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Everyone stay safe. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.